Hello friends, it's me, Kayla, and I'm here a little too close to the camera for my, no, maybe that's a little too far. What am I doing with my life? I'm here for my August wrap up, in which all of the books so beautifully once again fit into my little basket. Actually, I am missing one book, so we'll just start there. I read it because it was in my Airbnb. If you haven't seen this video, go check it out. And if I had this book, Succulent Wild Woman by Sark, or what was it? Sarah, Ariel, Rainbow, something. Oh, Susan, sorry. Last name, Kennedy. Got it. If I had that book, it wouldn't fit in my basket. So, okay, anyway, a weird place to start because this isn't something I would normally pick up, which is why I read it. I wanted to read some of the books that you normally pass over when you're staying on vacation. Like if the place you're staying has a bookshelf, a bookcase, maybe you'll take a quick browse, but you're not actually picking up a book and reading it, especially if you're an avid reader. I feel like you bring books with you on vacation. At least that's true for me, but I wanted to step outside my comfort zone, and I did. I ended up giving this not a rating. I didn't give it an official rating. I feel like if I give my rating, because it's not high, that it'll come across like I took it too seriously and that I don't know, like have a stick up my ass. Because part of me wants to critique this book and the type of feminism that it offers, and part of me acknowledges that I'm just supposed to take it for what it is and use it for inspiration to live my most fulfilled life. So here's what I'll say. I respect what this book did for women in especially the 90s, early 2000s, who needed a book like this. I think rereading it now is probably like a nice nostalgic experience, but I wouldn't recommend this necessarily for anybody to pick up for the first time. I'm sure there is better out there. And I say that just because I don't think this was the most inclusive it could be. I think it's a very specific type of woman that Susan is directing her advice at, and I totally get that. And women who are looking to quit their jobs and run through a field of flowers and eat more donuts and have sex with everyone they meet, or have the option to have sex with everyone they meet, like, this is for you. Live your most authentic life. Obviously not every woman or person has the same desires, ambitions, or drive, and some people don't have the ability to do certain things, so you just can't take it too seriously. I really love how she clearly wants to empower people, and how she's talking about how there's life after trauma, and I think there's a lot of important things that the book said. But also I found a weird pairing between all of the things that she wanted to be for her authentic self, and then also was talking about like being friends with millionaires and yachting, but then like kind of critiquing certain things that clearly got her to the space in which she was able to make certain decisions for herself. I've read a few books about feminism in my life, and I always come back to, this doesn't need to encompass everything. There isn't going to be one book for everyone and one that covers everything in the same way that I would like, so I respect it for what it is, and I just acknowledge that I'm not fun enough for this. Next, where should we go from here? I enjoyed a good amount of books this month, but I will say I didn't give out any 5 stars. I asked you on Instagram if you had any specific questions for any of these books, so I will touch on all of those. But somebody said something about ranking them or talking about which ones have the potential to be in my favorites of the year. And I have to say I don't see any of them probably being in that like top 10 of the year. There was also another question though that wanted me to finish the sentence. This could be 5 stars if, or this could have been 5 stars if. So I will answer that for a couple of these. So let's move on to something that I rated highly in my other nonfiction, so we get both of those out of the way right away. And that is We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast by Jonathan Safran Foer. I actually haven't read this, so let me just take a quick gander. He explores the central global dilemma of our time in a surprisingly deeply personal and urgent new way. Only collective action will save our home. Okay, so this, somebody asked me also if this brings any like new ideas to the table. And what I will say about this is I think it is a good companion to eating animals. This is one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books. I gave it 5 stars. I recommend it to absolutely everybody. This is what I consider a buy full price book. It's worth going to a store and buying brand new full price. This is a borrow from the library, find a cheap audiobook, look for it at the thrift store book. And only after you've read this. I know it's intended to be a standalone, and it can be a standalone read, but I just think it's a nice companion and follow-up to Eating Animals. I think this is fine to read on its own, but once you already have the background of this one works better. Here's the thing. This is a hard book to pitch because he even talks about it 64 pages in, what this book is actually about and why he's written it the way that he's written it and why the book is pitched the way it's pitched. I really just think that Jonathan Safran Foer is an excellent writer. I think he is so compelling without trying to come across like he's trying to persuade you. He's not trying to guilt you. He's giving a very honest look at agriculture and the history of the planet and the future of the planet, and gives all of these great book and research documents as examples, statistics of where the planet is at, and why people don't believe that the planet is in danger and why it is. The highlighting in this book was real. I loved so much of it, and I think that it acts as a really good reference point to help answer questions or persuade people to think a different way. That's why I think this is such a great companion, because this is a great book that gives you a lot of facts and information, statistics, and then this is more of like a conversation that will help you have conversations moving forward with other people who challenge things like climate change or veganism or the impact of factory farming on the environment. What I find we as a society struggle with a lot is when we are passionate about something. There's 3 camps of people. There's people who are equally as passionate about that thing as you. There's people who are moderately interested or passionate about that thing, and then there's people who don't care, don't believe in whatever you're talking about, have 0 passion. And when we believe in something so wholeheartedly that we want to persuade other people to research and learn and understand and feel as passionate as we do, a lot of times I find that we focus on that middle person who's already aware and is doing as much as they possibly can to improve upon something or care about that thing, instead of the person who doesn't care at all. And this is the person who has the biggest negative impact on the cause that you so strongly believe in. And it makes sense because we see a commonality with this middle person, because you used to be that middle person who believed in all of these things, and then you went full-fledged, passionate, protesting about it, really trying to change things, and this person feels so far left field that you can't even break through. So it makes sense to focus on this person who is doing a lot of positive things in this example, like for the environment, and you see the 1 or 2 things that they're not doing and you hone in on that. But sometimes as an activist, that unfortunately, and it's briefly talked, this isn't a concept talked about in here specifically, but there is this running theme of how to communicate with people and how to talk to people, which is why he talks about how he wrote the book, who he's trying to talk to, and also gives all of these statistics about the impact of certain things. For example, blood donations, when you offer a payment for somebody to donate blood, they're actually less likely to donate blood because the most important part of it is altruism. So there's a lot of talking points in here about how to get people to care, why people care about certain things, weighing the value of something over your own convenience, and seeing global warming and climate change as something that does need direct action, even though you aren't really seeing the impacts of it in your day-to-day life enough to convince you to completely change your habits. But the thing is, just going back to the general idea of having a passion for something enough that you want everyone to have a passion for it, this middle person is doing just fine. Maybe there are 10 things in my day that I could do to improve my impact on the planet, and I'm doing 8 of those things. So I always see an importance to get this person to this point rather than this person to this point. And the reason that it's hard to convince this person of something is a lot of times when you're trying to convince somebody who has complete opposite views from you to do something, is they see it as an all or nothing situation. When a lot of this book touches on the fact that nobody is perfect, even him himself, who wrote an entire book promoting veganism, not for everybody, but for him and the things that he wanted to do for his life. He talks about how even on like the book tour for this, he wasn't eating completely vegan, and why talking about that is so difficult but so important, because we have to acknowledge that doing the little things do have an impact. So just getting rid of like animal products in, you know, your breakfast, that's a great start. And it does all of these great comparisons. One of them is like marathon running. If you were halfway through a marathon and suddenly entered the mindset of having a full 26 miles to go, you'd probably want to give up. But isn't the starting point further back at the decision to run a marathon? So even if you make a plan to do something and you fail at that, you can't see it as starting from the beginning again. You just have to go forward, continuing to do the best that you can in that moment. I feel like I've talked about this too long, but there are a lot of things to gain from this, and 20 more examples than the one that I just gave. And the audiobook is also very good, so I would recommend that. I'll leave my link for Libro FM down below. I'll go through the next ones faster, I promise. I just feel like my wrap-up should focus on the ones that I haven't fully discussed with you elsewhere. So next I'll move on to this stack, which I read for a vlog, books that were sent to me. I covered everything about all of these, but I will run through them quickly again. These were all kindly provided by publishers as early copies. One Last Topic, Casey McQuiston, is about this romance between 2 girls in New York City. One of them stuck in time. She's from the 70s and is from current day. And it's like this mystery of how Jane has gotten stuck in this time loop. And also there's some other mysteries running throughout it. I got asked like a comparison between this and Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is a book I really didn't like. So I guess the comparison is just that I enjoyed this more. I gave it like a 3.5, 3.75. It's rare for me, as we know, to give adult romance like a full 5-star rating ever. So for what this was, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the little fabulous speculative element. Somebody asked if this is considered magical realism. The answer is no. Something I really enjoyed about this is that it talked about being a queer woman in the 70s and the history of queer identity and queer culture. I wish there was more of that. And there was a mystery running throughout this and a little connection between these 2 characters that I didn't love and I wish was done a little bit differently. And as somebody who just loves mystery novels, when there's a mystery introduced, I want it to take the focus, so I wish that it did. But I thought it was sweet. I thought it was atmospheric. I think they did a really good job of, though most of the book is set on this subway train, I didn't feel like we were stuck there, and there was always new fresh things and scenes and descriptions to read, and I quite enjoyed the writing of it. Next up, another female romance. This one's YA. It's called Rise to the Sun by Leah Johnson. Somebody asked to compare to You Should See Me in a Crown, which is one of my favorite like YA romances. So that was a 5-star, and this was a 4. As far as comparison, I would say this is a pretty common trajectory for YA authors. Is your first one, you're writing from like one main character's point of view and there's a love interest, and then often the next book you write is a little more ambitious with 2 POVs. I think I prefer the one focused point of view from this author and her writing style, but it was cool getting to see both of them and their histories and their experiences and their feelings for each other, and like viewing them each through each other's eyes. They are strangers who meet at a music festival. Each are there with different goals and intents and a different friend, and then they connect really quickly through these couple days. It's a very fast romance and also has a good amount of side characters and things going on, and it's one of those books, just like one I'm going to talk about in a bit, called The Summer of Everything, that also you never really know who the author is setting up the relationship to be with. There's like an old romantic partner, there is a crush, there's a friend, and there's always this wondering of who the author is going to make like the actual couple. It reminded me of Felix Ever After and Dress Codes for Small Towns, where there's also a similar vibe. So if you loved those ones, then I would recommend these, though I gave this 4 and 3 stars respectively. I thought it was fun and fast-paced and very convincing. I loved Olivia, is it Olivia, as the main character, as one of the main characters, and her just like love for love and constantly hopping from relationship to relationship and not really knowing what she wants. I thought it was cute, and I will continue to pick up from this author. Next up, I have Along the Salt Life Sea by A. Deborah Baker. This is the second book in the Up and Under series, first one being Over the Woodward Wall. This is a Seanan McGuire like spin-off kind of Middle Game, and I liked this just as much as the first one. It's a middle grade story. We're following these 2 kids who are neighbors, and in the first book they climb over this wall and end up in this magical place. And also in this one they are in an equally still magical place. I think where Seanan McGuire shines is you can really trust her with what she's doing with her characters, and I think this can work with you or not. Like if you want to feel like you never know what's going to happen, and if this character is in danger, are they about to die, or are they going to get in this big fight that's going to end up in them never being friends, like you can just trust her to always do the best for her characters and never go completely outside of their established identities, which I think is so great. She doesn't do anything just for the drama, which is why I think there are so many different places these characters go. It's like Portal Fantasy, and the focus is more the adventure and the different characters that they run into and the different scenes. Like this one mostly takes place on a boat rather than the drama being with what's going to happen to the characters. It's more like, where are they going to go next, which makes sense for a middle grade book, I guess. But yeah, really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Next up was I think my least favorite book of the month, and that's Switch by A.S. King. Again, really appreciate being sent it. I would have picked this up for myself because A.S. King is my favorite author, but this one was just too off the rails for me, and I say that knowing that my favorite A.S. King is surrealism, pure surrealism. This I would say is kind of close to that. I did get asked where people should start with A.S. King, and I've always recommended people start here, and I will continue to recommend people start here with Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future, because I think this gives you a really good idea of her writing style, and it's perfectly in the middle of fabulism and reality. And then from here you can read more of her realistic stuff, or if you like the weirdness, you can get weirder from here. In Switch, I respect so many of the things that I think A.S. King was trying to talk about and convey. This was written obviously in a strange time in the world, and I think there's a lot of commentary about feeling stuck in time and not knowing your future. It's got the question at its heart of like, what are we living for? Like, what is the point of everything? And as always, there's a lot of metaphor in here. So her family all lives in these tiny boxes within the house, like very separate. There's this idea of her discovering something that she can be really proud of for the first time, because she finds out that she can throw javelin farther than a human being ever has been able to. So it's like a coming of age story. It's about finding yourself, but it's also just this very weird focus and very weird writing style. It's parsed, it has slashes in like every single sentence. I get what she was doing with it, but I did not enjoy it. I did not enjoy the writing at all. If this was my first book from this author, I might not ever pick up anything else. So yeah, I definitely would say don't start here. But I also know some people have been loving that book, so it's a really hard one to know the right audience for. And then next I have The Wild Ones by Nafisa Assad, and this is a standalone fantasy. I got asked what song this makes me think of, which I think is a great question, and my answer is, what's it called? Oh my gosh, The Lost Boys? Lost Boy by Ruth B. This is a very loose Peter Pan inspired story. There is this group of characters who are all living together and have all found each other. They've all experienced trauma and loss and really, really difficult scenarios. This is a pretty explicit book. Covers a lot of heavy topics, but more in a memory scenario. So this book doesn't have a lot of action, I wouldn't say. And I think that the way that it's written is the perfect way that this should be written, as a standalone fantasy with a lot of things to discover about this group of girls. The two things that this does so well is it's written in a lot of telling and not showing, because if all of it was current action, I just don't think it would convey the same message. And also it's written like half and half between first person singular and first person plural. So we have a main character, Paheli, who has started this like group and saves girls and takes them in and takes care of them, and then they come together. It's like a woman empowerment story, and they help other people. And then the story, especially like the second half, focuses on some action where we are saving this boy who has become important to Paheli, and it's a very important situation in that second half. The first person plural is just like the wild ones speaking as a collective voice, and I think it's just so smart and so enjoyable. This was a real treat to read. It's a very difficult read and thing to acknowledge that these girls have experienced, but it's a beautiful story as well, and it's told so beautifully. There are little excerpts from, they feel like diary entries. It's called the Book of Memories, where we get to explore each individual girl's history. And as far as the question of what could have made it 5 stars, because for me it was a 4.5, it's that I think it could be 5 stars if I read it again. I think if I wasn't focused in the first half about not knowing if I was supposed to remember everything about each of these individual characters, and if they were going to come back around to have important storylines that I was going to need to refer to, I think I could have enjoyed it more. So my second time through, just like already knowing the point of the story and the type of storytelling style, I definitely think it could end up being 5 stars. Moving on, since I already just mentioned it, this is The Summer of Everything by Julian Winters. Somebody asked if you had to read this during summer, and I definitely put the pressure on myself to finish it during summer because it looks so summery and it's set during summer, and I can confidently say you can read this absolutely any time of year. I think that the themes are relatable at any time, and it's just this idea of finishing high school and going off to college and not fully feeling confident in yourself, like as a person, in a relationship, in a friendship group, with your job, with your family, with your like area of focus, and just like not knowing where you really belong. For Wes, that time in his life does occur during the summer between high school and college, and Case and Calendar has actually blurbed it, so I think this is a great comp for that. During the summer, what's happening for him is the focus of the story is saving the bookstore that he works for. So he is seeing bookstores consistently closing down in his neighborhood, and he works for a bookstore that is very important to him and has meant a lot to him as he's grown up just above it. And so him and his group of friends, including his best friend Nico, who he's completely in love with but hasn't admitted it to him, they come up with all of these different scenarios, all of these different events and ideas that they can bring to the bookstore to help save it. It's pretty cute, it's pretty fun. I gave it a 3-star just because it's a book that the writing you could see clearly evolving throughout it, and I think with a bit more editing the first half could have reflected the skill in the second half, but there was a lot of clunky, especially introduction of characters. I just could not get my mind in the book. I very much felt the entire time like I'm reading a book, like I was reading a book. I was never fully immersed. Just the way that characters and their attributes were introduced didn't feel super authentic. So I would like want to introduce a character and it would say, oh, I noticed you're wearing your glasses, and then they would have this conversation, and then it would be a paragraph of Wes explaining that like Nico hates his contacts and always wears his glasses and blah 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 blah, and then it was just like, well then why would you call it the fact that he was wearing glasses if you know he always wears glasses? Or Nico would say, oh, I could have picked you up from the airport, and then Wes would be like, oh, everyone knows that Nico can't drive. And it would just be like these opportunities to introduce elements of the characters, but in conversations that wouldn't really happen with this well-established friendship. And clearly when you can see that he already knew certain things about characters, it was just for our benefit. And like obviously the introduction of characters is for our benefit, but it just didn't feel natural. The reason that maybe these two got 5 stars and this one is more of a 3 is that we also don't really get a lot of time to enjoy the relationship that we're supposed to be rooting for, or any of the relationships that go on. Things that I was supposed to care about as a reader, I couldn't fully, because it was like 3 pages and then the book was over. Next up is my book club book for the month, which is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. I have an entire live show. We talked at length about this and all of the co-hosts really enjoyed it, so it was a fun discussion. I gave it 4.5 stars overall. When asked what could have made it 5 stars, I think it would just be more twists. I love Samantha Downing and her over-the-top writing style. In this, we're following Teddy, who's a professor who wants the best for his students and the parents of his students and his colleagues, and so he's willing to do anything to make them the best they can be, whether that means manipulating them or drugging them. It's very dark, it's very funny. There are so many different characters and so many different connections, and there are multiple deaths, which just make it fun and over the top. Next up, the other thriller I read, I didn't like quite as much. It's called A Noise Downstairs by Linwood Barkley. Yes, I borrowed from this from the library, even though I read it in the Airbnb. It was sitting at my local branch, so I just picked it up. And in this, we're also following a professor. His name is Paul, and at the beginning of the book, he stumbles upon a colleague committing a murder. And the 2 victims, they basically wrote out these like suicide notes on this ancient typewriter. And then he, the main character, gets gifted a typewriter, and he's convinced that it's the same typewriter that these people used, that they were forced perhaps to use, and that he's now being haunted. He's experienced some traumas, and there's definitely a lot of memory loss, which I appreciate memory loss being a plot point and not a plot twist. And I love a story of like, is it paranormal or not? This is the next book I'm going to tell you about. But I want them to be paranormal. When a book teases, is it paranormal or not? If it's not paranormal by the end, I'm sad. I just mentioned that because it's happened to me quite a few times this year. But with this, it was just very like surface level, entertaining thriller, the type of movie that I enjoy watching, but not necessarily the type of book that I enjoy reading. These next 2 and last 2 I read for my 5-star prediction. So I thought this was going to be 5-star and it wasn't, and you thought this was going to be 5-star and it almost was. So A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee was one of my most anticipated of the year. It follows 2 main girls going to this Dalloway school. One of them is Felicity, and she's returning after her girlfriend died, and there are these supposed like witches haunting the school. And then we're also following Ellis, who it's her first year at the school. She's an author. They're both attracted to each other because they're mysterious or very talented. They become infatuated with each other, and I love that idea. Dangerous friendship, dark infatuation, like that's something that I really love. It's also a sapphic story, dark academia, like it ticks a lot of boxes for me, but overall the writing and the atmosphere completely did it for me. But the storyline itself I found very dull and uninteresting. I didn't really see what these characters saw in each other. I didn't feel like I really got to know them, and we fell into certain tropes that I really don't like in this genre. While I respect them, and I understand this is a very personal story from the author too, I love the commentary of the book and also like the essay or whatever that the main character is writing within the book about the history of like madness versus witchcraft and the way that women have been treated throughout history. I think it's really cool, and I think this book said so many interesting things. I was just not caring about much of it, so it got that middle 3-star. Will pick up more from the author, but how could it have been a 5-star? I don't really know if it could have. If it was adult, and if it was more of a duology and we got to explore some more themes, maybe. And then lastly, The Need by Helen Phillips, 4.5 stars. The book that I recommend to nobody. I refuse to let this thing happen that has been happening to me recently, where books are getting super low average ratings and then I love them and then people read them and then call them overhyped. I will not allow that to happen here because I don't know the audience for this. This isn't a book like Bunny or Catherine House or Follow Me to Ground, where I'm like, it's just like weird and it's a niche kind of book for a certain type of reader. That's not how I feel about this. I don't think many people will like this. I understand the low rating, and I'm not trying to convince anyone to read it because it's a very hard book to pitch. And for the people who found it and love it, like, I have a connection with you, but I don't think any of us really know how to explain it in a way that will get it in the right hands. Because the thing about this book is you can't really fully explain the plot or why people might like it without spoiling it. 90% of the book is following a working mother who is exhausted. She's breastfeeding, she has 2 young kids, and she's talking about her breastfeeding and her 2 young kids whining and crying like the entire book. It's got some conversations about dimensions, and it's got a masked intruder, and I think that's all I can really say plot-wise. It's exhausting to read. It's about motherhood and the exhaustion of it, and I didn't like it because, like, I relate to the exhaustion of motherhood. So, like, I'm not recommending it to fellow exhausted mothers. I'm not recommending it to people who like books about other dimensions, because I don't think it does what a lot of books that talk about other dimensions do with those dimensions. And I can't recommend it to people who like weird writing, because it's not really that weird. It's just like a contemporary story, and it's got some really strange reactions from the characters, strange conversations, and you just don't know the point the entire time. And by the end of the book, there has been no point. There has been no explanation. A couple hundred pages of just, what's the point? What am I reading? I can't explain why I loved this, but it's one of my favorite books that I read this month. And that's everything. Let me know if I swayed you to pick anything up or not. And if nothing here swayed you, Erin, of course, asked the question, which ones have the most or least compelling first sentences? I don't think it's this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. My top might be, entitlement has a particular stench, pungent, bitter, almost brutal. Teddy smells it coming. Or it might be, 13,000 feet above sea level, you can drown in air like water. It's definitely not, she crouched in front of the mirror in the dark, clinging to them. The baby in her right arm, the child in her left. I don't think it's, can I touch you? But a top one might be, once in a time that was earlier than it is now, and later than it might have been, later than the great ages of heroes and monsters, when quests were taught in school alongside the subjects we still have today, literature and swordsmanship, arithmetic and alchemy, science and the art of finding and fleeing from monsters, there were 2 children who had lived in the same ordinary town since the day they were born. And with that, I will see you soon with another video. Bye!